Hi, I'm Sandra Lannerman from URI Cooperative Extension, and today we're visiting Hope in Maine, an incubator kitchen here in Warren, Rhode Island, where food makers come from all over the state to use their shared kitchen facility to make all kinds of different products. Today's session, what we're going to focus on is how to use a dehydrator. What can a dehydrator do? But also how you can get away with using your oven in your own kitchen to dehydrate a few products. Before we get cooking, I'd love to go take a little road trip, visit a farm, see what they have growing, pick some stuff, maybe get some growing tips along the way, and then we'll come back here and I'll show you all things dehydration. So we are visiting Arcadian Fields Farm here in Hope Valley, Rhode Island, tucked away in the middle of the woods. We're gonna go out there and see what's ready for our dehydrator, but before we do that, let's go meet the grower. Hi Diana, thank you so much for having us out to your beautiful organic farm here tucked away in Hope Valley. I'd love to just hear a little bit about where all of this started. How long have you been here for?
I've been here for 25 years. I was super lucky. I was growing food on other people's land for a long time and just happened on this place in the middle of nowhere.
Awesome. And I know you're an organic grower, so for folks at home that want to grow things organically, do you have like a couple of tips and tricks, like what works, what doesn't work?
Do what grows best for you. Like focus on what grows well, and if it doesn't grow well, just forget about it. Get it somewhere else. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Don't fight with nature, just work with what you have. So most consumers are aware of what organic farm means and the practices that go along with that. Some consumers are less aware of what Rhode Island GAP stands for, which is Good Agricultural Practices, and we know that you've been a part of that program for a little while now. What does that mean to you as a grower?
Well, it means two things. One is expanded access to market. So for instance, Farm Fresh Rhode Island, I'm pretty sure it's a requirement to sell through them. And it also helped me look to be a better farmer. I learned some things there, or learned to think about growing a little bit differently, and yeah.
All right, so we are in this beautiful row of peppers. There are things growing all around me, but I'm exclusively in an area where there's a lot of hot peppers growing and sweet peppers growing, which is absolutely perfect for dehydrating. So a couple of reminders before we pick. Always want to start out, assess your health. If you're not feeling good, don't pick. Make sure you're washing your hands before you come out here. Good old-fashioned soap and water. Make sure they're dried really, really well. And start out with clean harvesting tools. So, perfect at home is using the colander that you have, because that way when you're done, you could just simply put it into the dishwasher and it's going to do all the cleaning for you. And I've got my food safe scissors that I'm going to use. So, I'm finding some beautiful peppers right here. So I'm picking a combination of hot paprika, mild peppers. I can see some cayenne peppers coming up, so this is going to be really, really fun. Okay, so now we're in a section of the farm that's growing a lot of herbs, mixed in, of course, with a lot of flowers that are bringing in so many different pollinators. So herbs are terrific for dehydrating and turning into your own dried spice blend. So here I am picking some really beautiful oregano. And I'm gonna scoot over a couple rows here. Actually, I can grab it right from here. And we're gonna grab some of this beautiful sage. Sage is really great because you can mix it already into your flower gardens that you might have. It does come back every single year. And when sage is in bloom, oh my goodness, there's nothing more beautiful. All right, so look at all this beautiful dill. You can see here these traditional nice dill heads that are great for bringing in pollinators. So we're gonna leave sun, but we're gonna cut a little bit to dehydrate. And this is a fun one because I find it really hard in the off season to find dill head. You can find fresh dill weed, but the dill head is a really fun ingredient when you're making pickles, which of course you can do year round as well. All right, so I think we have a lovely bouquet that we're gonna send into the dehydrator and make them nice and crispy, and we'll go from there. That was such a lovely time on that farm, and I can't get over how delicious it smells. I'm very excited to dehydrate, but before we do that, I want to introduce you to my partner in crime from the Food Safety Education Program at the University of Rhode Island, Nicole Richard, who is going to help answer some of the frequently asked questions we get all the time. I love teaching these classes in person. Dehydrating is one of them, and we always get someone that asks, what are the food safety risks associated when you're dehydrating food?
And that's a great question. When you're dehydrating fruits or vegetables, the biggest concern is mold growth. So you want to make sure that you thoroughly dry the produce. And then when you're storing it, make sure that it can't take up moisture and become moldy. So putting it in a nice airtight sealed container is very important.
That's great. So if you see mold, it's either going in the compost or tossing it. And I'm wondering, I know a lot of people also wonder, can you take tomatoes and some of the produce that we've pictured today and air dry it out in Rhode Island, you know, in the summertime, outside?
Sun drying or air drying is really hard and challenging in Rhode Island because we have so much humidity.
And even on those hot, non-humid days, if we're air drying it outside, we never know if a bird is going to fly overhead and there's going to be droppings or mice, just things that we won't.
And that's a huge food safety risk.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Nicole. I'm going to get my dehydrator out, and just like you said, I'm going to show some tips and tricks on how to use it in the oven as well.
Sounds great.
All right, thank you. All right, so we are ready to start cutting up our peppers, and you can see here that I am wearing some single-use non-latex gloves, and the reason why I am doing that is because I am working with some peppers that are really, really hot. And even if you think you've got some tough skin and you're just tough about it, I thought so too, and I learned the hard way one time, and my hands burned for hours and hours and hours. So I have these gloves on that is going to help protect some of that hot stuff from getting onto my hands. So basically what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take a variety of peppers. We can use the same dehydrating tray for all of them, and I will show you that some of them are going to probably take a little bit longer than others. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to cut them in half. You can honestly keep the seeds in there if you want your end result to be super, super spicy, but I am going to take out the seeds and a little bit of the membrane. So I'm just gonna cut it in half. This is my compost bowl, so I'm gonna send that into the compost for later. And for right now, I am just going to work with these peppers and get off all this little membrane here and just stick with the pepper itself. And I'm gonna do that for most of these. And you can chop these up in a variety of different ways. I would say if you are going to make a powder, then maybe you want to go a little bit smaller. But if your point is to keep them a little bit larger and whole and use them in recipes later on, then you can do that. Depending on how small or how large you keep your pieces, that's going to determine how quickly or fast it dehydrates. So for these ones, I think I'm going to do some longer strips. And I'm just gonna make them so that they're just a little bit flatter. And I'm simply going to just place them onto my tray. You can load this as much as you want. You just want to make sure that you've provided a little bit of breathing space for whatever vegetables you're putting in there. So you really just don't want them to overlap as much as possible. And then for these ones, these cayenne peppers, I'm just going to keep them whole. So I'm just gonna simply put them right on here, keep them whole, and I'll show you what those look like when we're all done. Those are gonna be really, really hot. All right, so we are ready to get some of the herbs ready, loaded into our dehydrator tray. You can see with this one and with the pepper one, you can see there's this nice little screen. They usually come with dehydrators, and that's so if you're working with something really tiny, it won't fall through the cracks. So my hands have already been washed. They're nice and clean. They're one of my favorite tools to use, and it's really, really great to do something like this with kids. So we have some sage that we picked at the farm, and I'm simply just kind of gonna go through, and I'm just gonna pick them each individually and start layering them on to my tray. Oh, and it smells so amazing. And again, you're gonna wanna go through. If any of them looked like they were already starting to deteriorate or they looked really old, maybe there was some insects on there, you really wanna avoid these. And of course, I've already taken these herbs when we got back from the farm, and I washed them and I thoroughly dried them, right? That's gonna expedite that process. So there's some of the sage. We also have some of that wonderful oregano. And the oregano, you can do the best that you can getting it off. Like I said, this is a lot easier using with your fingers than it is with a knife. So here is some rosemary that I actually just picked from my garden. I had a ton of it, and I am just stripping it and sprinkling it on there as well. And I could probably load a little bit more in there, but we're gonna move on to the dill. So for the dill, I have dill head. I love dill head. I love preserving it from the garden because it's really hard to find from the grocery store. And I just simply cut it like that. And I'm just gonna take these right here, and I'm just gonna kind of fan them out like that. All right, so now that we have everything chopped up and ready to go, Here is one example of a dehydrator. They come in all different shapes and models. Most of the time, the hot air either comes from the top or the hot air comes from the bottom. So I had this plugged in. It makes a very, very low sound, but I will tell you, as soon as you put food in there, it makes the whole house smell really, really good. So when you're looking at the dehydrator, most of the time, they're going to tell you what temperature you need to set it at based on the type of food that you are dehydrating. So for the herbs that we got ready, it says it right on here. It says herbs and spices, 95 degrees Fahrenheit. That's why it's a little tricky to do these things in an oven because it doesn't quite get that low. So I'm gonna lift this up right here and you're gonna see that there is the tray that we have of all the different herbs. Again, if you wanted to do a lot at once, which I encourage you to do because this does use electricity, it comes with a lot of racks and you can always purchase more. So you could layer this up. You could do one whole layer of sage, one whole layer of marjoram, but stick to herbs and spices that all require that 95 degrees. As soon as we move to something else, like our hot peppers, then we would refer to the instruction manual or right on the dehydrator. And if we went over to fruits and vegetables, that's gonna go up to 135 degrees. So I would, again, make sure that my herbs, were kind of brittle, a little crispy, then I would know they were done. These can get set aside, and then I would put these peppers on. And the peppers could take, depending on how many you have and how many layers you have going up, it could take one day, it could take closer to 2 days. Dehydrators also, this one in particular, they can also do nuts and seeds, all different types of fruits and vegetables. Think tomatoes as well. You can do fish, meat, and jerky. So there's a lot of different things that you can do in a dehydrator, and it stores so well throughout the winter season. All right, so now I want to show you something that you can do using your oven instead of a dehydrator. A dehydrator is key for certain vegetables where you need to get really, really low because it can get downwards of 95 degrees, but kale chips are really, really great for doing in the oven because you do that around 200 degrees. And think beyond kale. You could do this with any type of green. You could do it with collards, you could do it with Swiss chard, you could do it with spinach, but we're going to use some of this beautiful kale that we picked from the farm. I've already washed my hands and I've already washed the kale and it's nice and dry. I love doing this with my kids or family members because all they need to do is forget about this long stem that can go into the compost pile or chopped up and reserved for other things. But I'm just going to take almost like potato chip size pieces and just start laying them out there. I'm just gonna rip them off with my hands. So when you go to season this, which I'm just gonna keep it simple and do salt and pepper and a little bit of olive oil. And when I say a little bit of olive oil, a little bit of olive oil, maybe 1 teaspoon for a batch like this. And then you can use whatever herbs you want. Salt and pepper is kind of like, the base of it. But if you are having an Asian meal or an Indian meal, you could go with garam masala and go with all different types of spices. So go with what you like. So again, we kind of want to make it so that they're not too overlapping. And again, it's just a tiny little drizzle of olive oil. Tiny. Measure it out if you're nervous. That's about right. Got some Himalayan pink salt and some black pepper. And I'm gonna wash my hands one more time. My hands are nice and clean. So now I'm just gonna simply massage that kale and make sure all that oil gets distributed in those seasonings. So I'm gonna pop these in at 200 for about 20 to 25 minutes. And then a little trick that I like to do at the end is just to turn the oven off at that point and let them sit in there for another 5 to 10 minutes. And that's gonna ensure that they get really nice and crispy. So there we go. I'm gonna go pop them in the oven. So that was dehydrating in a nutshell. So one of the things you wanna look for to make sure your product is completely dehydrated is you're going to wanna pick it up and you're going to wanna make sure that it's not sticky or tacky. If it's sticky or tacky, you're just gonna wanna turn it back on and let it go again. Remember that some things might dehydrate a little bit quicker than others. The jalapenos dehydrated very, very fast. So I did pull those and let the other ones go for a little bit. You can keep them whole. And put them into like a nice airtight jar and use them later in your recipes by simply chopping them up. You can rehydrate them by pouring a little bit of water over to them. You can also take it one step further and make your own spice blends, which is really fun. Take a whole bunch of peppers, varieties, or stick to one and mix it with some different herbs. You can add salt, you can add pepper, you can really have fun with this. And that's simply what I did. I just mixed in a whole bunch of different herbs and these peppers and made something that smells so good. It is very, very spicy. We kind of have a contest in my house who can do the most. So beware, it does have a kick to it. And remember what Nicole said, we don't want mold to grow later. That's our biggest food safety risk. So when we are done dehydrating, we're gonna store things in a nice airtight jar. And of course, if you're not ready to purchase a dehydrator, there are some things that we can do in the oven. I have these kale chips that just came out. They're absolutely, I can't resist, absolutely delicious. Put them in front of kids. I can almost guarantee they're going to eat them. If you have questions on dehydrating or just home food preservation in general, you can always contact URI Cooperative Extension and ask your questions. I hope you had a good time. I had a blast. Thank you so much.